Welcome to the Speexx Exchange podcast with your host, Donald Taylor. As a renowned learning and development industry expert, as well as chairman of the Learning and Performance Institute, Donald sits down with experts from around the globe to talk business communication, learning technology, language, digital transformation, and engaging, upskilling, and reskilling your organization. This podcast is brought to you by Speexx, the first intelligent language learning platform for the digital workplace. Listen in and you might learn a thing or two.
Welcome to this episode of the Speexx Exchange podcast with me, your host, Donald Taylor, and I have with us today Mitja Kulcar, who is the Frontline Training and Development Lead at Mol Group, which you may not have heard of, but is an extensive retail operation throughout Central and Eastern Europe. And Mitja will tell us more about that in a minute. And we're here today to hear Mitja's great story about implementing digital support for learning, not in an office, but with frontline staff, largely blue collar, people who are working, getting their hands dirty in gas or petrol retail stations and service stations. Not necessarily how you would expect or where you would expect a digital learning implementation to take place. So, Mitja, great to have you with us. Welcome to the episode. Can you say something about yourself? Can you let us know where you're from? What's your background?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Don. I'm flattered to be here. From the beginning of my career, my heart belongs to retail, and I found my passion in helping frontline employees to become the best of themselves. And I think I progressed through all of major areas in retail in the last 13 years, starting from being a retail associate during my college time, leading a store, then also progressed to the regional sales manager. And somehow on the way, I landed in frontline training. Today, I lead global retail training and development, sitting in the retail business division, as opposed to maybe more conventional setup of learning and training, being usually part of HR. And with my team, we serve 15,000 employees that work on our almost 2,000 petrol stations, or how we call them, service stations in our organization, that are dispersed across 9 countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And we are based in Budapest.
It's a very distributed workforce that you've got. You've got something like 6, 7, 8 people in the service stations. In some places, you'll have far fewer than that. And that brings with it its own challenges, plus the fact you've got really different cultures, haven't you, in these different territories that you're in. It's not as if it's in, England, Scotland and Wales. These countries speak different languages and have deeply different cultures, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. I think if we're talking about the scale, then we are dispersed from Montenegro, Bosnia, up to Slovakia and Czechia. And maybe even if we see maybe our story from a different perspective, or to give you more context, Mol Group is an integrated oil and gas company. And so, as mentioned before, I'm from the retail division. And in 2015, we started business transformation, where we realized that we also have to expand our station network, mainly by acquisitions. And on the other hand, we also wanted to switch from primarily selling the fuel to enhance the non-fuel business as well. And what I mean by that is that we started to modernize the look and feel of our stations. But what is the most important is that we were extending the offer for our customers. So we started to sell things like fresh food, sandwiches, hot dogs, fresh coffee, and all of the other sort of services too. And this part went pretty well, but then I would say the reality hit us when we realized that we also have to support 15,000 frontline employees that were, on one hand, the first human touch point with our brand, but on the other hand, as we talked before, 7 different cultures, 7 different languages, 9 countries, 10 entities. So the complexity was really hard. And having said that, imagine an employee on a petrol station before 2015 who was primarily helping customers to fuel up their cars, stock the shelves, being the cashier most of the time. But today, in just a couple of years, the same employee also prepares fresh sandwiches, comply with a bunch of HACCP standards, makes cappuccinos, and so on and so forth, and even smile and be nice to customers. So it changed drastically. So we are bringing enormous complexity into this role, not only from a new process point of view, but also behavior change, new skills, and building on their performance. I mean, I can say that we did this transformation and we successfully shifted, but how we did it was actually with also a help of the learning technology and this digital transformation.
You explain it very well, because there's no reason why somebody who fills a car with petrol can't make sandwiches, but it's not why they joined that particular line of work in the first place. And that little bit you said that made me laugh about smiling to customers, it's not necessarily what you associate with the guy in the garage or the woman in the garage who's filling your car with petrol. Sometimes they'll do a great job, but not always. And yet, if you're in the direct service line, that's absolutely essential. It's not just how do you make a cappuccino, it's how do you make a cappuccino, serve it with a smile, upsell somebody from a regular to a large, and have them walking out the door thinking that they've had a great experience and they want to come back. And that's a big change from just asking if they want the tank full. So you said that the key to making this implementation was you couldn't have done it without the learning technology. But the learning technology, although it was necessary, it wasn't sufficient by itself, was it? Who did you have to get on board, and what did you have to do to make sure that it was implemented well? Because trust me, in my years in this business, I've seen lots of learning technology implementations that have failed. What did you do to get it right?
That's a great summary, which you did. And I think we really went through these kind of stages. But the first thing which was important to highlight, I would say, is that in order to support them when we started the transformation, was that first we implemented a face-to-face training program back in 2017, which we still use. But after delivering that program for 2 years, which was mainly focused on the soft skills and why we do this transformation, and why we have to behave different to the customers.
Just to be clear, you're delivering face-to-face training across 2,000 locations.
Yes, we usually rent some meeting rooms, and then we have big logistical challenges to move 15,000 people to those locations. So this was also one of the learnings in those 2.5 years after we kicked off this face-to-face training. As mentioned, we were focusing mainly on the soft skills and why we have to change and how to serve the customer, why smiling is important, and so on. But through those 2.5 years, we also learned a lot in terms of that we were not agile, because on one hand, we were delivering something. For instance, in Hungary, where we have more than 3,000 employees working on the stations, we needed more than one and a half year just to do one round. But we are retail, so people change. Fluctuation is higher than in other industries. It was somehow inevitable to start thinking, okay, but how we can enhance this, how we can also provide trainings on the products, on the services, on the processes which were being implemented. Actually, every month there was something new. And also, on the other hand, employees were asking for more trainings from these areas, because there was actually, and what was existing was, let's say, manuals, standard operating procedures, but who reads 50 or 100 pages? Nobody. So having said that, we actually started to ask ourselves these potentially scary questions: what actually we have to achieve in order to overcome these challenges? Who are the stakeholders here? What are the other problems which we have identified over the last few years? And when we had all of these answers, this is where we started to actually developing the concept, how the learning technology can help. This was at the end a no-brainer that we have to move into this way. But you also asked me what was one of the main challenges, what was most important. It was the stakeholder management.
It's because the technology will never do it by itself. You obviously you need to get people on board with that. Now, I'm guessing that an organization that has traditionally sold petrol and serviced cars is not one that's necessarily technologically dynamic. What was the reaction of the rest of the group when you said we're going to change from face-to-face training to a digital solution? Were they positive and enthusiastic?
I would say that on the top level, it was accepted very well. But when I was progressing through the organization, I think I had quite many stoppers on the way. Even to be frank with my own team on the local levels as well. Not everyone believed that what was the vision that this can actually be implemented and that this can solve our challenges which we have identified. But to make our case really tangible, and that we also prove why this is meaningful to do this change, what we did is service design research. So we did deep dive interviews on actually our top 5 markets. So we talked to employees on the stations, we talked to the station managers. We had 2-hour interviews with them, shadowing them on the job to really understand what are their pain points today, how they are solving, let's say when they are faced with the questions from the customers on which they cannot react or on which they cannot answer. So this was a very valuable research, and it also gave us more confidence than in the beginning, because we, let's say, also realized that majority of them are already using their own mobile phones for some station level chats, like exchanging the schedules, manager contacting them for maybe some work-related novelties which were coming, or promotions and so on. Because today, with our transformation, 87% of our employees are actually using their own device to access our training application. And I think that's actually great, because on one hand, they had the opportunity to use the back office computer to access it. But on the other hand, it's much better if they are using it on their own mobile device, because they can do their training, or they can search for the information whenever, wherever. So commuting to work, or in the downtime, they can just pick up the phone from their pocket, and they can read the things, they can learn, they can find the job aids.
And just to be clear, when you're talking about job aids, we're not talking about 20-minute courses here, are we, that you're delivering?
Yeah, you're right. So we have the microlearning approach. So our kind of daily session lasts from 3 to 5 minutes per day. Realistically, also the data on the platform shows that this is the time what they spend. So it really fits into their workflow. And this is one of the important learnings, that when we were searching for the solution, it was important for us that we find really something that fits into their workflow. Now,
they needed to find something to fit their workflow. And
yeah, our solution is based on a microlearning. So the whole experience which they have on a daily level is around 3 to 5 minutes per day. And we are monitoring this every day if this changes. And also our research, which we did, as I mentioned before, showed us that this is the way how we should approach our training, because on one hand, these employees are blue collars, as you mentioned in the beginning, so they are a deskless workforce. They cannot sit in front of the computer, but rather they have a downtime when they can do something in the meanwhile. And also, if you are looking from our beginnings, when they were having the trainings in the meeting rooms and they were traveling somewhere, it was better that we come to them, to the stations, rather than pulling them away from the workplace. And also, I mean, just from OpEx perspective, imagine 15,000 people to move them logistically to different locations. That's quite of a challenge also, not only from the logistical point of view, but also from the OpEx point of view. So we're also talking about quite many OpEx savings.
And you mentioned the word agile earlier. Of course, everyone mentions the word agile. Everyone likes to think they're agile, but in retail, this is really important to be able to respond quickly. If you're trying to get 15,000 people to go somewhere to get trained, you might be able to touch base with them once or twice a year. But your retail lines change faster than that, don't they? So if you want to, I don't know, a new product comes out, you want to be able to get the whole workforce aware of it within, let's say, a month, don't you?
Exactly. And when we were just focusing from a face-to-face perspective, that was a nightmare, because on one hand, we had, a channel. So we had a team of trainers who were on the field and training the people. They had a program which they had to follow. But on the other hand, a constant kind of pleas were coming from the head office. Oh, can you also include this in the training? Because it's coming now and it will be important. So these were the challenges with which we actually didn't know how to cope. And I'm also happy that we didn't let this to happen, and that we were following our path, which we have defined as a best face-to-face training, which we have, and rather finding the solution how we can really show the agility and not just do something for the sake of doing. And this is where the digital or the learning technology comes in, because it can really help us not only to train people about the new things which are coming into their workplace, but also how to communicate with them differently. Again, if we are talking about restless workforce dispersed on almost 2,000 locations, how we communicated with them before was with one email per station. And if we have on average 8-9 people on the station, that's actually impossible that everybody would read the emails.
Yeah.
It was mainly about the station managers,
and
we have around 1,500 station managers. But then, when we are sharing operational updates or the promotions which are coming, we can just cross the fingers that 15,000 station managers will share the same information to 15,000 people.
Yeah.
So from operational point of view, big challenge, and agility is crucial here, as you mentioned before.
Let's just go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said that not all the stakeholders, meaning the higher ups, were necessarily keen or could see the use of the digital, but you said that actually most of them did, but you got some resistance from your own training team. So can you talk about that and how have they adjusted to it, and what have you done to use them in a different way?
I think that the key approach which we used here was that we started with a small test. So we did a pilot first. We had clear concept. We had a clear implementation plan from a communication perspective as well. So what was the pre-communication, launch communication, post-communication, change management approach. And we did it on our smallest market with around 350 employees for 3 months. And we were really closely monitoring what is happening. So what are their feedbacks? How are they using the application? When are they using the application? Collecting all of the feedbacks. And I can say that we had a constant more than 90% participation on the platform. We also had seen that the employees are logging in to the platform actually every day when at work. And it was something, A, very new for them, B, it was modern, and C, it helped them solve the problems which they had at work. And I would add one more thing, because in our case, it's not only about the trainings, but it's also about the communication. And I think that the combination of both is perfect.
Yeah.
As mentioned before, we were not having a direct communication channel with them before, but now we had kind of a perfect solution.
I love this as a really well thought out and implemented learning technology solution. You've gone out, you've done your service design, you've done your pilot, you've got your stakeholders on board. You know what it is that people are doing in their jobs and how to support them to do a better job in the future. But the killer question is always, so what? Did it make a difference to the business? Did it change what you were trying to change? So did it help make the transformation of Mole from a straightforward gas pumping organization to something that does more, sandwiches, coffee, and so on? And did it make a difference to the bottom line? And were you even able to check that, Mitja?
I knew that probably we'll come to this question because obviously also many people were curious about what will happen with that. Because at the beginning, again, if we are seeing from that period when we had quite many non-believers, they maybe have seen this new edition as something fun to have at work because the platform which we are using also applies gamification elements. So it looked like just, a game at work, but actually it's more than that. And yes, after 6 months of implementing it globally, we can see the results, because whatever we do in terms of content design, we definitely link everything to business targets and the KPIs. So looking from perspective, what we have seen as the first results was to have a reality check on what is actually the baseline knowledge on our strategically important products and services. And it was interesting to see how low it was. On one hand, it was a shock, but on the other hand, at least for me at the beginning, it was a winning moment, because this is how I could prove the importance why we are doing what we are doing.
Can you just explain? Sorry, Mitja, can you just explain for a second what is the strategic product for you? I mean, it doesn't sound very complicated. Perhaps to our listeners, you've got some petrol. How much do you need to know about petrol?
Well,
I'm being trivial, obviously. obviously, but it clearly is complicated, but can you explain a bit?
There is quite many things, especially if we're talking about what is the difference between the main grid and the premium fuel.
Right.
So how to actually explain in those very fast conversation on the cash register with the customer why they should try the premium next time and how this will help to their car and to the car performance. So this is one example. So the majority of transactions are fuel, but as mentioned before, we are also switching to the non-fuel business.
Yeah.
I mean, we switched.
We have a strategic product, which is premium fuel as opposed to regular fuel. And you were saying that you establish a baseline of knowledge, and you thought actually that baseline was lower than you'd expected, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually low. And as mentioned before, we were pretty surprised. But over the period of time when we started to increase the knowledge with the help of the platform, what we have seen is that the confidence and the knowledge about what are those main features and benefits of premium fuel and how the employees can communicate about these benefits with the customers actually showed or reflected in increased premium fuel share sales. And this is one of the most important areas for our business. On the other hand, we are also having a lot of promotions on a monthly level and marketing campaigns. And what we've learned in the past is that it was not enough if we communicated only once at the beginning of the campaign with our employees on the stations, what is the aim of the campaign and what they should do, because simply it's not enough. And what we can do today is that we can communicate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis about highlighting those key learning points, about those key messages which are important in communication with the customers, but also what are those potential questions which customers may ask. So they are, again, confident and knowledgeable when they have to react.
I like the point you made there about the need to communicate as well. You're not just saying to them, the super fuel has got these ingredients, but you're also telling them in that 30 seconds at the cash register, here's how you communicate it to have an impact. And clearly that worked. Well, I say clearly, can you tell us something about the results? Whatever you can expose, obviously it's a commercially sensitive thing, but you mentioned that sales went up.
Yes, I mean, there were many implications which we can pull out in which we actually invested in the last year in terms of content design. Obviously, the fuel was one of the main areas which we covered. But on the other hand, we also did a reinforcement of our face-to-face program where we were focusing on soft skills and how to serve the customers in a more way. And this was also important because in our researches, which we do on a yearly level twice, usually is that we have seen also the growth in how the customers perceived us from the perspective of being competent and being kind. So these stats went up in the majority of markets, and it was also connected to training impact.
So it wasn't just knowledge, it wasn't just immediate sales, it was also perception of Mol itself as a brand that these people who are the front line had conveyed to your customers, the competence, the sense of being kind. That is brilliant. I'm fascinated that it was possible to do that. One last question, and I don't know if you've even got the data on this, Mitja, but what about the people themselves? Did they stay longer? Was there less turnover of staff as a result of the training program? Or did it have no effect?
That's a good question. And we will dig deeper to this area this year, definitely. Last year was, a different year. So everything has changed. So I think that there were many factors which could impact this. So we haven't actually measured anything in this way. On one hand, because we are planning to develop the onboarding of the new hires during this year, which we could then connect with a longer tenure, for instance. But as mentioned before, last year was all around the pandemics, so this was not in scope. But what I can confirm,
kind of difficult to compare any data when you've got such exceptional circumstances. Yeah.
But what I can say, actually, also from my kind of personal passion about the Frontline, is that I would say in general they are usually undervalued and also underserved. So with this approach, we show them more opportunity in terms of taking care about them and also giving them something new, which is not really available in our region. talking to them when I go and fuel my car, and always asking them for the feedback. What do they like? What they don't like, and what they would like to change. I'm actually getting most of the positive feedbacks. There are really not much things which they are highlighting as negative feedback. And what they also emphasize a lot is that they feel valued. We were also able to drive the pandemic situation very well with the help of the technology, because we could send the messages through this platform in those difficult times, and to really make sure that they stay healthy, that they stay safe.
Mitja, thank you so much. I've been making notes while you've been talking, even though I've heard this story from you, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. But each time I learn something new. And I love this idea that in spending 3 to 5 minutes a day with, you can transform them as part of an organization. You can increase sales. You can make them feel probably happier about what they're doing. But I also think that last point of yours is really important, that probably it's most effective if you really care about these people. If you have, as you said right at the beginning, a passion for retail, and I would say probably a passion for the people who are involved in it. I think that may have made more of a difference. Your personal commitment may have made more of a difference to this program than you might be saying here. But it's great to hear about this transformation you've done. And thank you for sharing the detail of it. Some last questions that we ask every guest, Mitja. 2 questions. Firstly, what do you wish that you'd known when you started in learning and development?
Actually, not knowing many things was for me a motivational driver that was inspiring to discover all of these new perspectives. I said before that what I think was right, what we did was a good stakeholder management, because we did really a thorough preparation. But still, what I wish I knew is to expect that I would have to repeat my pitches over and over again, and putting the effort in the buy-in across the organization. I might even say I was not really prepared for so many funny looks when I was explaining the vision of what we would like to achieve with going into mobile training and so on. And even to me, sometimes I started not to actually believe in the vision. I'm happy that we continued, and that we are here where we are today. But I would say there is one more. Actually, it's understanding what was or what is available on the market from learning technology point of view, and to have someone to talk to and to understand that actually our retail challenges were. Because talking to at least 15 to 20 vendors there on the market, there were not really many who understood the blue-collar population, which is different. And I think we also have to look it from a different perspective. Just from technical point of view, they are not sitting at the desk and not having a computer at work. So the approach is totally different compared to the white collars. So this is the area where I think also struggled very much, because I was not sure what is the right option. But on the other hand, I'm happy that we did all of these researches before, so that we really made sure we understand who is our learner, who is our employee, and what he or she really needs.
My observation would be that perhaps not having a learning and development background, but a retail background, really helped you. And if you'd had a training background, you might have come in with some assumptions that would have stopped you being effective. I think going out and discovering the situation, asking the questions from your stakeholders and from your frontline staff probably helped you develop a great solution. Final question, what are you curious about at the moment, professionally, in your work? So what comes next? What are you curious about?
Yeah, before we were talking about also behavior change, and I think this is one of the very interesting topics for me. So how to better support the behavior change with a combination of training design and communication. And what I mean here is designing courses, or how to design the courses, where we will be actually considering how to evoke reactions and feelings in the learners. The latter one actually comes from as an inspiration from reading a book that really made me think differently about learning and design. It's the How People Learn by Nick Shackleton-Jones. I really think it's a great book. The other one will be how to set up an efficient onboarding journey to speed up the time the new hire employees need to become efficient and operational. We have a very good base, as mentioned before from the research which we did last year. But this year, the great challenge will be how to really put this into the place, and how to really design the content that will perfectly fit and be efficient. And third one, I would say dig deeper into the data which we are getting from the platform, and how to utilize utilize it with a meaningful interpretation, because we do our best to really tie every e-learning course which we do on the platform that is connected to some business goal and the KPI.